Hello, on behalf of HMH, welcome to today's webinar, Proven Practices to Engage Multilingual Learners in Productive and Affirming Lesson Interactions, presented by Dr. Kate Kinsella. Before we get started, we'd love to get to know our audience better. Please do feel free to let us know where you're joining us from in the chat. Today's session is being recorded. We will also be providing certificates of attendance to those who are joining us live today. Both the recording and certificate will be emailed to you within 1 week of today's event, along with related multilingual learner support resources and educator tools. If you are joining us via YouTube live stream, we welcome you. Please reference the video's description below and note the process to request a certificate for streaming today's live event. For those joining via Zoom webinar, please find Dr. Kinsella's slides and ancillary resources for your use during today's session in the chat. I see we have quite a bit of engagement, so I will be sure to repost that link in just a moment for you. If you're joining us via live stream, please find the link to these resources in the description below. Attendee microphones and cameras will be disabled during today's session. However, we do encourage respectful commentary and engagement via the chat box. If you have questions of our presenter, please add those to the Q&A box. We have reserved ample time at the end of today's session to address any questions you may have. For those joining via Zoom webinar, today's session will conclude with an anonymous survey at the end. We do hope you'll take a moment to provide your thoughts, and we thank you in advance for your feedback. Dr. Kinsella's 30-year career has been on advocacy and curriculum development for youths from diverse backgrounds who will often be the first member of their family to access higher education. A prolific curriculum author, Dr. Kinsella has co-authored research-validated programs to support multilingual learners in kindergarten through high school, such as HMH's English 3D and Read 180. She has recently been awarded 3 research grants from the United States Department of Education to address effective practices in advancing language and writing skills for English learners. She also serves as an expert advisor to the United States Department of Education and Office of Civil Rights on effective curriculum and instruction for English learners. Although she is an accomplished researcher and author, what fellow educators most appreciate is that she is truly a teacher's teacher, working regularly with kindergarten through high school English learners to refine her understandings, improve her practice, and support diverse students and colleagues. Please join us in welcoming Dr. Kate Kinsella.
Good morning, international colleagues. It's such a pleasure to be with you. I'm speaking from Northern California, so it's early my time. Thank you all for joining. In today's session, I'm going to be sharing practices that I've gleaned from my research and extensive classroom experiences to really support multilingual learners across grade levels and subject areas in more productively engaging in important lesson interactions with peers, many of whom are also English learners. When we really look at the research on what is going to move the dial academically for students who are learning English as an additional language, there are 2 areas of instruction where we need to have a laser-like focus. And really at the very top, the gold medal in the Instructional Olympics goes to really addressing vocabulary with vision, intentionality, and efficacy. And we need to really be clear-headed about what words we're addressing and how we're addressing them. And you'll see as I'm modeling interactions today and focusing on the kinds of vocabulary and other language needs students need support with to engage academically, uh, we'll see there are many ways to address vocabulary. And that's certainly a topic that warrants its own webinar. But really rivaling for the gold medal in the instructional Olympics for English learners is the need to really integrate mindful attention to building their oral and written English language across the school day, not just in a targeted English language development or English language arts period, but in math, in science, in social studies, in music, in all of their subject areas. And we're going to see in this session how I'm weaving in attention to vocabulary development as well as building oral and written English language proficiency into my modeling of practices to support academic interactions. Across the United States, in curriculum that is focused on career and college readiness, really the anchor standard for speaking and listening when it comes to classroom interaction is that students need to engage effectively in a range of collaborative discussions with diverse partners on grade level topics, text, and issues, and build on others' ideas and express their own clearly. There's a great deal packed into that standard, colleagues. I feel I could have it on the board every day of the week as I'm working in partner schools. And there's much that needs to be addressed to help students engage effectively in a range of collaborative discussions, to build on their peers' ideas, to express their own clearly. We have a clear standard, but we also need clear practices and resources to address that standard. I appreciate the spirit of this standard, and it was very much written with the goal of preparing students for the contemporary global workplace and for higher education and success in rigorous secondary education. But I think a little of the writing is confusing. If we look at the term collaborative discussions, I would ask you to reflect for a moment on the differences in our expectations if we ask our students to discuss solutions to a problem versus collaborate on a solution. And I find that in many of our standards and in our curriculum, we use many different words interchangeably as if they're synonymous when we want students to be speaking during a lesson. We use the word talk, conversation, converse, interaction, collaboration, discussion. And in my mindset, discussing a solution to a problem like plastic waste in the environment is different than collaborating with a team on a solution to reduce plastic waste at school. I'm going to ask you to really be mindful of the vocabulary you use when you're asking students to work with peers. And really, in standards aligned instruction with the rigorous curriculum you have for language arts, science, math, social studies, really it's not casual conversations at all. They're really being asked to discuss ideas and to collaborate. And a discussion is not an unaccountable casual interaction in the hallway or at lunch. In a discussion, we have a respectful exchange of ideas and we listen attentively to the person with whom we're interacting, and we try our best to convey our ideas and to stay on topic. But we do the exact same thing in collaboration. But whether we're collaborating with one classmate or with a team, collaboration is much more challenging because there's a give and take, and that everyone must contribute respectfully, everyone must listen attentively, and there's a joint response, a joint solution to this math problem, or a joint written response in this science lesson. And collaboration is much more difficult. So I would urge you to not use the word collaborate unless there's really a single response they're supposed to be arriving at. And instead, most of our lesson interactions, the vast majority, are actual discussion. One of my most salient research findings over the past 15 years is that many educators across kindergarten through 12th grade in all subjects give rather sloppy verbal directions. We keep kind of talking and giving directions, and then we say, "Do you have any questions?" And when I'm in classrooms, I hear students turn to their peers and ask in Spanish, or ask in Mandarin, or ask in Arabic. Um, what are we doing? And I'm going to urge you, you'll see examples of lesson directions in my slides to really make some clear directions for interaction that you can have as a poster, have as a slide, have as a cardstock you're putting on a document camera to really help students see what you're asking of them and to retain it. And in any discussion task, there should be a speaking responsibility as well as listening. And in my recent, very extensive work in the elementary arena, much of my career has focused on middle and high school and young college students. But the past decade, I've really turned with a laser-like focus to elementary as well. And I see that often they're just sharing, but they don't actively listen to their peers. So, as an example here, that they need to share their idea twice, reading it once, then making eye contact and seeing it like a scholar. But they have a responsibility to really be listening to their partner and demonstrating that by saying things like, Jose Luis, my idea is like yours, or Mandana, my example is like yours, and to really have some accountable interaction. So, having a partner A and a partner at B, but really being clear on what listening expectations are and to make them increase in complexity as the year goes on. I hold off early in the year, and I encourage teacher partners hold off on actual collaboration for a little while. Students need to get used to interacting with a peer, interacting in a discussion group, really attentively listening before we lay on the expectation of collaboration. But as an example of a strong collaborative task, because all of you have text, whether word problems, whether science passages, whether literary selections, and giving students a couple questions they need to answer about a text section to be able to have as an example in your group of 4 students or with your partner together discuss ways to answer the question, identify text evidence, either highlighting with your cursor or checking off or putting a sticky next to it, and then agree on the strongest response. That when you're discussing with someone, you do not have to agree. But when you're collaborating, there needs to be some consensus. You have to agree on what's the strongest response. And everyone needs to write the response. Those kind of tired, unaccountable roles we may have learned in a teacher methods class, like one student is the scribe, one student is the reporter, one student is the timekeeper, one student is the motivator, that just doesn't fly in higher education or in the workplace. Everyone needs to listen and everyone needs to write it. And that writing is a demonstration that they've listened. And after you've collaborated either with a peer or a team, everyone in the group needs to be responsible for reporting. Having directed young college students at the university who were bilingual and bicultural, one of the most common findings I have is that in their secondary coursework, they didn't learn how to collaborate and how to report. You don't say, well, I said. You have to say, well, we discussed different possible solutions and we agreed that or we determined that. So being able to report using a precise verb for reporting, that demonstrates listening, as does during the class discussion, while other groups are reporting, listening attentively if you're the one who's going to report on behalf of your group. And I recently finished writing primary grades lessons, drawing from a recent research project for my curriculum, English 3D. And I see our little 5-year-old scholars, our 8-year-old scholars in early elementary, they are fully capable of doing this, of being able to say, my idea is a lot like Tehran's, or my idea is similar to Luis's, that we need to start young and teach them the language of academic interaction. And even if they can't spell it yet, perhaps they can't even read it, they can pick it up and use it. And we should be building our students' toolkit for phrases that are necessary in productive interaction, starting at an early age and adding new phrases to their interaction lexicon. Our standards say they need to attentively listen and to build on ideas. But I've worked with young teen scholars that are English learners, and no one taught them to be able to say, my idea builds upon Derek's. My idea is similar to Anna's, but I'd like to add that. Or I think we should also consider this solution that this is language to show you've respectfully listened, but it tells your audience, your classmates, your other workplace colleagues that you have something to contribute. This has become a cause célèbre for me because I want students, regardless if they're 8 or 18, to be learning the tools that will help them actualize their dream. I included a resource for you when you download the extensive handout on page 13 of language to show you are listening. And this is the kind of language we need to put into our lesson directions. These are the kinds of posters we should have up in the classroom to be able to say, we've been restating our partner's idea, saying, so you think that? Today we're going to use a different phrase. So you're suggesting that. We need to build up these phrases so they can use them organically. And that's what a successful scholar can do. I included a couple resources you can actually give to your students. This is one I like laminating, with one side exchanging or discussing ideas and the other side collaborating. And I wouldn't just give this to students on cardstock and say, rise to the occasion. We need to say, students, turn to the red side. Point to number 4, comparing. In today's lesson, please put a sticky underneath the first bullet. My idea is similar to names. As we are discussing possible solutions um, to this problem, listen to see if one of your classmates has contributed a solution that is much like yours. And if so, if, for example, your idea is similar to Ariana's, you're going to not say Ariana took my idea. You're going to say my idea is similar to Ariana's. So to have this as a resource, in their notebook, on their desk, to help them navigate the school day. And because I've been working more extensively the past few years to help math educators, whether they're teaching 4th grade or teaching 9th grade algebra, to really math requires a lot of collaboration and a lot of academic interaction, and language not only to contribute your idea, but to demonstrate that you've been listening, to build on other ideas, to be able to reflect on learning or to give peer feedback. So these are resources you might want to consider using. I am a curriculum writer, and I have to say that often as I look at materials, and I've just come from speaking at a couple big conferences in California and in the state of Michigan, and as I look at curriculum written specifically to support English learners, that often there are directions like, have your students turn and talk, tell your students to think, pair, share. And when you think about a student navigating the school day, having someone say, whisper to your neighbor, or heads together, or think, pair, share, to think about if they hear all these phrases throughout their elementary, middle school schooling, for example, what is problematic with simply telling multilingual learners and developing young readers to do a think, pair, share, or turn and talk as your default lesson interaction strategy? And I see underprepared teachers are often just saying that, okay, share your idea with your neighbor or turn and talk. And there's nothing wrong with the phrase turn and talk or think, pair, share. But as an instructional coach and an advocate for all English learners and struggling readers, just saying turn and talk really does nothing to support them or build their confidence or competence to engage in an academic interaction. They need more than opportunities. They need support. And turn and talk and think, pair, share are common strategies. And a strategy in K-12, when we talk in K-12 instruction about a strategy, It's basically a technique that we use to accomplish a lesson task. And there are many, 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 many strategies that are popular, but that are not all that effective. And just saying think, pair, share and turn and talk are strategies that I think are very weak unless they have a backbone and they have the support that goes along with them. There's nothing, no magical elixir with that phrase. Or saying things like popcorn reading, where you read aloud a section of this literary passage, then you just randomly call on a poor unsuspecting student to read aloud who stumbles through it, then calls on another classmate. These are very common practices with underprepared students, and underprepared teachers, but these are not effective. And what the research is really telling us, if we want to advance English learners and have them be successful, and we know many of you are supporting students who come with differential backgrounds, some coming from more privileged economic backgrounds, some not, some coming with stronger track records of English instruction before coming to your classroom, some not. But all of our students deserve, who are acquiring English as an additional language, deserve consistent instructional routines and really research informed routines. And when we talk about research informed instructional routines, this is a term used widely in the research base now, colleagues, and of which I'm a passionate proponent. That an instruction routine is not a behavior management routine, let's say for your first grade class, that when students, keep getting out of their seat, they may go from green to yellow as a warning. And then when they've done it 3 times to a red card. This is instead a step-by-step instructional sequence for addressing a specific instructional goal, where there's a clear teacher process and a clear student accountable process. In my modeling, I'm going to model setting up a lesson prompt for a discussion with a clear process. I'm going to advocate in this webinar for some really strong practices for eliciting a range of responses and getting tentative or reserved students to contribute. And I'll also be modeling as I read the discussion prompt multiple times how to build fluency, both oral and reading. These are just examples of some instructional routines that we should be following with a clear process and fidelity so our students can pay attention to learning. And when we talk about a viable routine rather than something that we just like to do, it's evidence-based, it's consistent. Our students know, oh, when Ms. Salazar is teaching me vocabulary this way, I know exactly that this is a really high use, important word, and I know exactly what she's going to do and what I need to do. And the purpose of routines is so that our students can have much more efficient lesson delivery, and it's not a revolving door of activities that they have to learn how to engage in that require extensive setup, and that we can have more time on task, more student learning, more student engagement. And academic interaction is not a casual conversation. I don't use the word conversation during the lesson. Instead, to say, have a quick have a quick brainstorm with your partner. Quickly brainstorm or quickly review in informal English, or in casual English. But conversation, when we say have a conversation, students immediately kick back into relaxation mode. If you're having a casual conversation about what you like doing during the summer, and you say, so what's your favorite season? A student will answer like this, maybe summer. Why is summer your favorite season? Because why? Well, because I get to do fun stuff, sleep in, no homework. And casual interaction in English is very fragmented. It's brief phases, it's imprecise words. It's often grammatically reckless. Lots of fillers like, like, and there's no elaboration. You don't really elaborate in detail. There's a lot of reliance on context. That is not what your standards aligned, rigorous curriculum is asking. If you're having a social studies unit and you're learning about the dreams, the aspirations, as well as the challenges that historically many immigrant groups have brought to your country. Um, and you ask the question, what challenges do recent immigrants face? And you tell them that challenges are problems or difficulties and that they have. And you just say that question and you say, let me give a model response. One challenge recent immigrants face is finding a well-paying job. And another challenge many recent immigrants face is locating affordable housing. And you might model two eloquent responses that are really standards aligned, academic responses, taking words from the prompt. But when you get out your can of sticks with students' names on them and you randomly call a name and you say, Lila, what challenges do recent immigrants face? You're going to get this. Um, I don't know, the language. And when you say, yes, Lila, you're right. Another common challenge many immigrants face is learning a new language. And then you call in another student and you say, um, Desmond. And you call on Desmond and he says, school. And you say, yes, Desmond. Another common challenge recent immigrants face is adjusting to a new school system. In my entire career, I have never once seen a student say, aha, there is a pattern here. We mutter a word or phrase very softly, but our teacher eloquently mines words carefully from that question or prompt and flips it into a statement and purposefully integrates those words and then has a thoughtful idea. Not once. And what I will say, colleagues, is we allow students just to kind of verbally mumble a word or phrase and that, but in our assessments, whether our high stakes assessments to get into a competitive high school or college, or our yearly assessments or our benchmark assessments with our curriculum, our students are expected to write complete sentences, to use precise vocabulary, to have thoughtful interactions on paper, not a brief, truncated, casual response. So is my point that we need to start having students always speak like written English? No, but we need to offer support. So they're clocking in more miles on the tongue. So they're speaking more complete sentences. So they're using more precise vocabulary. Because my experience, colleagues, is you can't write what you can't say. And if they sit mute most of the time in your language class, in your science class, in math, there's not magically going to be wonderful writing just because they had a digital device. One of the most evidence-based practices you can integrate into your instruction is the use of response frames and word banks. And a response frame isn't just a starter. On the resources I provided for you to get students started in an interaction, they have great utility. But for a lesson discussion like this, where I want every student contributing a thoughtful response with their partner, I want every student potentially ready to contribute to a class discussion. And I want students to take the ideas from this class discussion and be able to write a thoughtful, constructed response to elaborate that what I can do when the cognitive demands are higher in a lesson, when this is a question that really needs to have them flexing their language muscles and their cognitive muscles, I need to offer support. And a response frame takes words right from the directions or prompts, flips it into a statement, but shows students the kind of grammar that needs to follow. So in this case, one common challenge recent immigrants face is, and I've deliberately inserted the word common, It was not in the directions or question, but common is a high use academic word. And I try to build up students' vocabulary that is used commonly in academic arenas, in professional arenas, that is used across subject areas. This is a cross-disciplinary word. And we don't say one usual challenge, we say one common challenge. So, one common challenge recent immigrants face is, and after is, the only way to complete this appropriately in English is to have a verb ending in ing, an action word. Working in classrooms where there are not only many English learners, but also students who are duly designated. They are English learners with a learning challenge. They are exceptional learners. That I have learned when we only offer one model response, like learning a different language, they believe that is the only correct response. Or a student who is reserved or more intimidated by their peers. We need to offer two model responses. One, so it stimulates more thinking, but two, so they see a pattern. And I like really calling out in color. Notice my verbs, learning a different language. You might think of other things they need to learn, learning how to drive, learning how to try new foods, learning a different school system, really showing the pattern and equipping them with a delimited set of words that might be helpful for them to craft their own response, not to serve as a constraint that you could only use these words, but to be an idea generator, but to also help them see a pattern. So you might think of other challenges they have, making something, for example, making friends, or speaking a new language, or using school resources. Some of you teach students who are strong speakers of one or two other languages, but academic English, just like academic Farsi, just like academic Korean, just like academic Spanish, is not a natural language. We don't speak academic language over a family dinner or on a family outing or on the way to school. And academic varieties of language including all the vocabulary, the sentence structures, the grammar and register. We need to teach it because students, it needs to be taught, not just caught. I'm going to model setting up a discussion prompt, and you'll see that I have many scaffolds or supports in place to support all students at different proficiency levels. A strong piece of practical advice I will offer you is to assign your students a partner letter, either partner A or B. Put a poster up on one side of the wall that is letter A and B. And the reason being, you can say everyone in this row is letter A, everyone in this row is B, or everyone closer to the door is partner A, the clock is B, so that when you say, now that we've had an opportunity to brainstorm ways in which animals can demonstrate human emotions, I'm going to ask partner B to offer the first example to your partner so they don't sit in a state of inertia, not interacting, so that you can get them off to a productive start. And I have found it very prudent to talk to students about the responsibilities of a lesson partner, whether at school, whether in a club, in a community organization, or work, that everyone wants a productive lesson partner or a productive work partner. And a productive partner, that adjective is very positive. It's someone who tries their very best and works hard, but who also listens to others and is respectful of others and is patient and helpful. It isn't just about sharing your idea, it's about listening and helping others. And it's very important that you initiate your students to a scholarly partnering voice. When I see teachers just say, turn and share with your neighbor or turn and talk, many students are just inaudibly mumbling or speed sharing really quickly. And whether at school or work, if you're offering information to a peer, we need to slow it down a little bit. We need to emphasize keywords and pause. And when a student is an English learner, they're disadvantaged with listening. So we need to make sure that our peers are speaking clearly, responsibly to each other to increase the odds that they can listen attentively. As a university professor and as the director of a middle and high school program to support first generation aspiring college students and directing my university's first gen program, that often I will tell you that students are inaudible. And to actualize their dream of being an emergency room doctor, to actualize their dream of being a professor, a lawyer, to own their own top chef restaurant, they need to speak audibly and clearly. I urge you to do a productive partnering warm up. I talk to them and say, for example, if I asked you this question, how does a productive lesson partner, the kind we all want, show interest in a classmate's idea? You need to slow it down, emphasize important words, and pause like this. A lesson partner shows interest in my ideas when she asks me questions if she doesn't understand. Because our goal isn't to race through it as quickly as possible or mumble through it so our partner can't even hear, but to really emphasize and pause so our partner can catch our important ideas. It's really important to have a sobering discussion about listening too. And it's very easy to get pictures of students not listening in class on the internet. When I'm working with children or teens, I show pictures and say, you need to show with your body, as your eyes, your body, as well as your words, that you are listening. And something I'm going to do, I tell them, and that we need to do is in every lesson, if you have a peer interaction or during a class discussion, I'm going to give you a listening goal, not just a speaking. And if students are interacting with a peer, one of the very first listening jobs I give them is to restate their partner's idea. I'm going to urge you to get away from just saying, so your idea is. You can begin with that. But as you're moving, it's a math lesson and they're sharing a method. Have them say, so your method is. If it's a social studies class and they're sharing an observation, have them say, so your observation is. It's a science class and they're sharing a solution. Say, so your solution is. And teach them phrases like, yes, that's right, or that's correct, or no, not exactly. What I said was to really build in responsible listening and demonstration that you're listening. I want to urge you to give thought to students' partners, whether they're in a small group or a whole class. And the most important thing to think about is one of them is not partnering extremes. If you have them working one-on-one with a student, which I encourage you to do often, even if students are seated at a table, I build in a lot of partner interactions. But observe their behavior, observe their proficiency, but do not put a really strong student with your weakest student. If you've got a very needy student who, for example, perhaps has a learning challenge, in addition to being early in English proficiency, pair that needier student with two students who can focus and who are kind and who are patient. And I want to urge you also to get away from saying we're going to have a conversation or we're going to talk about. Instead, say, in this lesson, we'll read an informative text about plastic waste in the environment and discuss ways we can cut back on plastic use in our everyday life. Use the word discuss, use the word discussion, because it's a cue to students. Oh, that's not just informal where we're kind of brainstorming and speaking casually. This is where we try to flex our language muscles, try to speak clearly, try to use precise words. Now, I'm going to model as if you're my students. And next week, I'll be teaching a lesson for newcomers in a high school in New York City. And I'll be also teaching a group of students who are at intermediate proficiency. And I'm going to bring my small portable document camera. And I'm going to be working right with the page under the document camera because I haven't had the chance to work with these students before. So I don't want to be fiddling with a lot of different technology. But I'm going to model with slides right now. So students, everyone right now should be on page 6 in your lesson handout. Students, AB partners, please politely verify, that is, check that your partner is on the right page. Because if your partner is not on the right page and pointing to the correct slide, you're going to have difficulty discussing ideas together shortly. In today's lesson, students, we are going to have a discussion on what makes a good partner. And yesterday, I specified that in this class, you will have opportunities to work independently by yourself, to read, to think, to write, but you'll also have opportunities to work with another student. In every lesson, I'm going to build in one or two opportunities to quickly exchange ideas or collaborate on a response, to be able to get feedback with another classmate. And because you're going to have regular opportunities to work with another student, I felt it would be helpful for us to discuss what makes a good partner, the kind of partner everyone wants to work with in class. We're going to be discussing this. We'll gather ideas you can use in a writing assignment. So everyone needs to pay attention and everyone needs to get ready to learn. Let's take a careful look at the prompt. I'm going to read the prompt a few different ways. And these are ways we'll be working with complex text when there is technical vocabulary or long sentences that wasn't designed for a read aloud, that it's more complex. And the first time, I'm going to ask you just to look at the words, follow carefully. Don't just sit and listen. Look at the words carefully as I read, and I want you to track. You can either use your reading guide card, your finger, or your pencil if it'll help you to follow, looking at each word as I read at a just right pace, not too fast or slow. Describe the characteristics of a lesson partner with whom you work effectively. Now, students, I plan to read this again at a just right pace. And this time I'll read aloud and you follow, looking carefully with your eyes and tracking with your pencil or finger if you wish, or card. But this time I will omit, that is, leave out one word. And I will not omit a word like the or with that does not carry a lot of meaning. I will omit a word that has meaning, a word I know that you know already, and a word that you can read and pronounce. And the reason I'm going to do this is so you can demonstrate to me that you're actually reading, not just sitting and listening. Because students, I get very concerned when a teacher is reading aloud, including myself, and no one's looking at the text but me. This is not meant for a read aloud. You've got to read it carefully to improve your reading and to really be able to understand the vocabulary when I explain it. So the reason I'm leaving out a word is to show me you're actually reading with me. Here we go. Describe the characteristics of a lesson with whom you work effectively. Thank you. Now this time, we're going to read again at a just right pace, but I'm going to read a phrase. You'll notice that I've been doing this, reading words that belong together, like this. Describe the characteristics. And pausing, because these words belong together. They have meaning together. They're sort of Velcroed together, just like the Velcro on your sneakers. They have meaning together. And I didn't do this. Describe the characteristics of, I chunked words together that belong together. That's a phrase, a group of words that go together, that have meaning together, that are not a whole sentence. So I will read a phrase and I'll cue you with my hand. As we're learning this, you're going to echo back. We'll echo read. You echo the whole phrase. Here we go. Describe the characteristics of a lesson partner with whom you work effectively. Now, students, we're going to blend some phrases. I'm going to read some larger groupings, some longer groupings of words. I'm going to put some phrases together, and you're going to echo with me. Here we go. Describe the characteristics of a lesson partner with whom you work effectively. All right, now that you've read that so fluently and beautifully, we are ready to get in and unpack some vocabulary. Please circle the first word. This first word, describe, is a direction word. It is a verb. It's an action word. And this is an action word, a direction. I'm going to give you a lot for something I want you to do. You've all been told to describe things before, but I will remind you, in this lesson, you are describing a person. You're describing your partner, the student you're working with. And when we describe a person, we explain how he or she looks and acts and talks and what the person says. In today's lesson, you're not going to be describing your partner's eyeglasses or your partner's new cool pencil case or your partner's sweater. You're going to be describing how your partner acts with you and talks with you. That's what we'll focus on, their actions and how they speak with you. What makes a good partner? And we know that what you're going to describe about your partner is characteristics. Please underline the word characteristics. Characteristics is not a conversational English word. It is not a word we use on the playground usually, or the cafeteria, or at a movie. It's a word that we use at school and work a lot. This word you will definitely have in language arts, in science, music, art. Characteristics, when we talk about characteristics, it's something special about someone or something. So often we might say the qualities. You're going to describe what's special, what's good, what's positive about your lesson partner, because we're focusing on how you can work with your partner effectively. Please underline effectively. Take a careful look at the ending of this word, that ly. It tells me it's an adverb, a word that describes an action. You're going to describe how your partner acts that helps you work effectively. I might have said to work successfully, work actively, work remarkably, but I said effectively. And you'll hear that adverb a lot. I want you to collaborate effectively. I want you to proofread effectively. I want you to read effectively. And that's why I read the prompt multiple times. Effectively in casual English is really well. Please write really well to help us all remember what effectively means, this really strong academic adverb. So students, in short, you're going to be describing how your partner acts and talks with you to help you work really well. And we know when we describe someone, we use adjectives. And all of us might think, well, I want a really nice partner, or a good or smart partner, or maybe even a fun partner. But those are everyday adjectives. And when we're doing academic speaking and academic writing, we push ourselves, we elevate, and don't just use the first word that comes to mind. Because I might want a nice partner, and so might Mandana. But Mandana's idea of a nice partner may be very different than mine. And Elena might want a good partner. But what a good partner means to Elena might be very different than what a good partner is to me. I've brainstormed a few adjectives, some of which you know already, that would be examples of a nice partner. We want a polite partner, one with good manners. Echo, please, polite. And we all want a helpful partner, someone who can help us with spelling, maybe help us use the technology more effectively, maybe help us when we don't know how to write something. So helpful, echo please. And I'm sure you appreciate a patient partner, as do I, someone who doesn't rush me, someone who lets me get my ideas out, someone who doesn't interrupt me. Echo please, patient. And there must be at least 100 ways to be a good or smart partner. But one way I appreciate students is hardworking. Echo, please. Hardworking. This is someone who does not fool around. They get down to business. They work, they focus, and they don't fool around and do other things. Echo, please. Hardworking. And I can already see that many of you are so organized. You already have your resources. You have your book. You have your notebook. You have your pencil and pens. You have your erasers. You have what you need to do the work in my class. I appreciate an organized partner. Echo, please, organized. And another idea that's very different I'm not very strong with drawing at all. I'm really challenged in science, in classes that require drawing, or to do something artistic with a computer. But I know other students who are, and I appreciate an artistic partner, someone who really has a flair, who can draw or describe things in very artful ways. Let's say artistic. Now notice, I have these words on blue sticky notes, and what I'll tell you students is blues for you. You can use any of these words. And I'm going to show you my model responses, and if you like the words I've used, they're in blue. You may borrow one of mine for your response. All of you are going to share an idea with your partner, and we are all going to use the first response frame. Our frame is, I work effectively with a partner who is blank and blank. Echo, please. I work effectively with a partner who is blank and blank. You see, I've done a lot of the work for you. I've taken words right from our directions and I've flipped it into a statement. That's what scholars do. That's what professionals do. That's what successful students do. I, you're not just going to answer by saying friendly or smart. You're going to give a complete sentence and then you're going to include your two adjectives that you really connect with. Everyone's going to write a sentence for me, but if you're satisfied with your sentence and you think it's strong, I have a fast finisher response frame. And it is, I also appreciate working with a partner who is blank. Let's all say, I also appreciate. And you'll notice I mentioned as I was sharing precise adjectives for a good partner or smart partner or nice partner, I said I also appreciate a helpful partner or I appreciate a hardworking partner. And that means I really like it. And that's a more academic and professional way to say I really like it. So these are our frames. And I've prepared two model responses. I know it's easier for you to really hang on to my model response if I display it. So let's take a careful look at my first response. I work effectively with a partner who is prepared and helpful. Let's get comfortable using the frame by practicing with my idea. I work effectively with a partner who's prepared and helpful. Thank you. You'll notice I used that precise adjective helpful that was on our precise word bank, but I've included a different word, prepared, and that means someone who comes ready to do the job. They've been thinking about it. They have what we need to work together. They're ready to work. It's not, oh, I left it in my cubby, or I left it in my locker, or I left that at home, or oh, I didn't read it yet. They are prepared. And I also appreciate working with a partner who is open-minded. Let's get comfortable with the second frame, our fast finisher frame with my idea. I also appreciate working with a partner who is open-minded. So students, you'll notice on page 7, I've included some blanks for you to write your idea, your first or your fast finisher if you have time. And as you are writing, I would appreciate it being quiet in the classroom. All I want to hear are your pens or pencils moving. But if I may help you, I'm going to walk around the room. And if I may help you, I'd like you to raise your pen or pencil. And that will be a cue to me, a respectful cue that you would like some assistance. Maybe you want help with spelling. Or maybe you want a better word. You might say, is there a better word for friendly? Or, I speak some of your home language. So you might say, how do I say simpático in English? Or, may I run an idea by you? And that does not mean, can I run around you? It may be, can I tell you what I'm thinking? And I'll say, certainly. What are your thoughts? And let you explain and say, I see what you're saying. What you're saying is you appreciate a partner who's focused, who doesn't go off and start doing something different. That's a well-chosen adjective. Now, I'm going to stop the modeling here, colleagues, but you can see it's an art and a science to assign a response frame well, and we need to go slow to go fast. As I'm observing as an instructional coach and in my projects doing walkthroughs, as I'll be doing in New York City next week, and observing instruction in elementary and secondary and coaching, one of my most frequent concerns is the hasty directions, the poor setup. So English learners and striving readers are just left in the dust without a clear sense of how to proceed. When students are interacting with their partner, I want to urge you to have some really clear directions. Some of my favorite and recurring, and that in fact I'll be using in my elementary and secondary lessons next week, are read your idea aloud to rehearse, then look at your partner and say it with expression. And if they haven't written, just to say your idea once to rehearse, say it again with expression. To give them two chances to really rehearse the idea, but also to build in more ability and accountability for their partner to listen, but give them a listening task. For example, so your idea is, yes, that's right. And what this allows colleagues is if they're repeated sharing, it gives me an opportunity to monitor, to walk around and say, Louisa, I'd like you to go first with this thoughtful example. Or Andrew, if we don't get this idea in the class discussion, will you please volunteer it? It gives me an idea if my students are having difficulty or their various ideas. I want to urge you, before students begin to interact with their partner or a class discussion, do a warm up. Say, just to get comfortable using the frame, let's practice with my idea. And before a class discussion, let's wake up our public speaking voices. And I'm on a cause célèbre to get students to use their public speaking voice, to really project their voices and to use the frame, but to also, in a class discussion, to give them a job. Listen for an interesting or original idea, one that is new and different, but also compare. Today we've been using my ideas similar to, but I have a new expression. My idea echoes. Just as we've been doing echo reading, maybe Lynn said my idea. I appreciate working with a partner who is focused and your idea is on task. You can say my idea echoes because it's almost exactly the same. I am going to share some practices for calling on students, but one is I pre-select. If I've pre-selected two students and Andrew is my second, I will say, Andrew, you're going to assist me by choosing the next scholar to contribute from a different table or a different part of the room, not from your own table. So Andrew then says, I choose Olivia, and Olivia then selects the next person. Um, I want to urge you to really get your students to speak up. Remind them to use their public speaking voice because working in middle and high schools where students have been allowed to whisper all throughout elementary school, I have really strong auditory processing, really accurate auditory faculties. And as a researcher, I'm constantly struggling to hear what students are saying, even when I'm walking next to them. So say, students, I'll remind you to use your public speaking voice. Let's do a public speaking warm-up and practice with my idea. And if you don't speak loud enough, I'll remind you to use your public speaking voice. I want to urge you after a class discussion to really hold students' feet to the fire, not literally, but figuratively. Hold them accountable for listening. To say, I asked you to listen for um, a reasonable solution or a thoughtful observation. In this case, an interesting or original idea. And I'll say, I'd like you to share with your partner now either an interesting or original idea you heard. And I'll begin by saying, an interesting idea I heard was was um, was creative, and an original idea I heard was thought-provoking. So model for them, and this gets more miles on the tongue, but it also gets them going, okay, what was the idea that I listened to that was very careful? You'll see that really the backbone of effective English as an additional language instruction is really structuring effective interactions using scaffolds, building their language knowledge. You'll notice that I used some response supports, but I had a lot of structure in how I set up interactions. But I also was building their metalinguistic knowledge, calling out the part of speech, talking about precise vocabulary, showing them the kind of grammar you need to complete this response. I also developed oral fluency by having them practice with my frame, but I developed reading fluency, reading the prompt multiple times, and using different phrases and expressions and strategies for calling on students. I included some resources for you on what makes an effective response frame, but a frame is not a test item. It's something that can be addressed in multiple ways and it calls out the grammar. We've got to be specific about grammar sometimes when we want to have a thoughtful idea, but we want accurate oral fluency. And a frame puts me in the driver's seat to model. And I want to urge you as fellow English as an additional language educators to quit just verbally modeling. We need to show, not tell. And I see that our youngest scholars, our students at early levels of proficiency, are not able to always hold on to our auditory, our verbal modeling, that we need to show it to them, to really show what we did, to show why our answer is more thoughtful. And I included a sample lesson from a curriculum I wrote, particularly for middle and high school students at intermediate level. And I included this just to show you on one page kind of everything there, sort of what a prompt is, what different frames are, having a grammar target, having a precise word bank, and building in a language purpose for listening to compare. I also included a number of sort of discussion scaffolds or guides for you. I want to urge you to really maybe take a little bit of a break from your standards aligned curriculum to build community. That when I'm working with a class, as I'll be doing next week, of all relatively recent immigrants and another with students who are longer term immigrants and younger and more mature learners age-wise, um, uh, many of them haven't really been engaging in interactions very much. That I like to begin with topics where everyone has background knowledge and they can learn something about their peers so they can practice the structures and the protocols of academic interaction with a partner in a class and listening with a topic that's easy, whether it's what are your favorite healthy snacks and fun snacks, or what are the characteristics of an effective partner. And just to have this, to have a really low tech, you heard me talking about a reading guide card. I get very concerned observing and I'm thinking, oh my heavens, my eyes are the only ones on the correct part of this lesson page. So to direct and focus their attention, I included some sample lessons for you where the bottom half is really what I prepare. I think of my model response in advance because when you're tired or you haven't eaten lunch and you're really low energy, you've got to really prepare in advance because it's hard to constantly be doing this on the fly. What I want to provide for students would be just the top half of this paper and initially provide it for them so they see what we're doing and then move toward just having them copy the question off the board in the frame. But to just use a sticky note, and you'll saw that I said blues for you. I use blue in my modeling for a response you may take. And red is stop sign, stoplight. Do not take this. This is my idea. So blue for you, red is stoplight when you don't want them to take the idea. I included some really successful community building prompts in word banks that you can use that are viable for children as well as teens. And I'm going to show you a clip of students in seventh and eighth grade repeatedly sharing. Colleagues, this is a cost-free technique you can use to increase their viability and engagement in class. And my directions were like this: just read your idea once, read it again, and make eye contact and say it with expression. Let's see how it builds their confidence, how it builds their oral fluency, and it builds their accountable listening demonstration. So right now, take another moment just to think, what are your two adjectives you want to start with? And I'll put back up the list and feel free to borrow any of these that you wish. Feel free. Partner A's, please begin sharing 3 times. And then B's, it's your opportunity to share 3 times. And students, if I haven't called time, saying 3, 2, 1, please share again, each of you 3 times. Thank you, A partners. Please lead the discussion.
I work effectively with a partner who is hardworking and focused. I work effectively with a partner who is hardworking and focused. I work effectively with a partner who is hardworking and focused. I work effectively with a partner who is tech savvy and curious. I work effectively with a partner who is tech savvy and serious. I work I work effectively with a partner who is serious and tech savvy. I work effectively with a partner who is helpful, patient, and helpful. I work effectively with a partner who is patient and helpful. I work effectively with a partner who is patient and helpful.
So colleagues, I'm hoping that you've seen repeated sharing. It builds their oral fluency, it builds their ability to demonstrate attentive listening, and it builds their confidence and often self-correcting. I mentioned the practices I advocate for calling on students, and the first is to walk around and discreetly pre-select. Having students share multiple times or as they're writing, pre-selecting takes the pressure off of us looking around the room and calling on volunteers. So I urge you to select a student with a representative response, not the most outstanding. So then that's intimidating to other students. If many students have said friendly and helpful, then I'm for sure going to call on someone with that idea. It also builds in a reason for other students to say, my idea was similar to Erica's. I also love having the student I pre-selected select the next student from a different table. And that's where this language comes up. I urge you to post a poster, put it up in your room, and start with the verb I choose, then I select, and I'd like to hear from, and let them then use any phrase they wish. But I like to save the expression I nominate for partner nominations, and I'll say, we've had 4 contributions. Now, if your partner had a different strategy, if your partner had a different example than those we've already heard, I'd like you to point to your partner or raise your pencil. And if you need to quickly check with your partner to remember, please go ahead. And then students will say, I nominate my partner Viviana. I nominate my partner Derek. And I say, thank you for nominating Derek. That was indeed a different example. That showed attentive listening. That's what scholars do. And I would urge you then to close by inviting a couple volunteers, whether students you encourage to volunteer or authentic volunteers, and giving them the option to share their own idea or something that they heard from their partner. And I found for tentative students, they often are very proud to share their partner's idea. These strategies for calling on students, actually evidence-based instructional routines, have been vetted in classrooms across the world in my practice and in my research endeavors. And I have a resource for you and 2 resources, one out of a curriculum I wrote, Language Launch, where I really scripted for you how to use the practice and modeled the kinds of things you might say. These are much better practices than just randomly calling on students or relying on volunteers. You saw that I think speaking audibly is important, but for students who aren't used to that, we need to be very kind and patient. And I tell them, if you don't speak audibly, I will never badger you. I will treat you just as I would a friend or one of your parents at a meeting and say, could you please kindly repeat that so your classmates in the front, like Jesse, can hear you? Or please project your voice, because I want you to get ready to be speaking loudly in classes and to be speaking loud enough at work. And I want to treat my students like budding scholars, successful students and colleagues. And I'm not just going to say things like good job, high five, thumbs up. I'm not training a pet. And I want to say, Deborah, that was a clearly explained process. Thank you. I really understand the steps you went through. Or Leonel, that was an original interpretation. You interpreted the character's behavior differently than your peers. Really use words if you're talking about reasons, do say that with them. Just in the interest of time, I'm going to move, but you saw how I was unpacking vocabulary, but only after reading the prompt multiple times. I used three techniques to read that prompt. The tracked reading, quietly reading, but really having them follow with their finger or pencil or a guide card. And I'm very concerned in classrooms across grade levels. I see students, the minute teachers are reading aloud, they sit back or sit up and they're not looking at the text. You need to make sure they're looking at whatever they're supposed to be looking at. I also used what's technically called close reading, although I don't typically use that term with students. That's when you leave out a word and they're following along and you leave out a few words, not too many. This is a technique I also use with students, and I use the echo reading. With younger readers, I typically largely use tracked reading and echo reading. With more older readers, starting in upper elementary, when you're having longer text, I use the close reading. But we need to build their fluency with text, and nothing was designed for a single read. Nothing. So I urge you to segment text, read a portion multiple times, and then discuss it. And, pardon me, the technique I used of echo reading, it's called phrase cued reading. It has a solid research base for building oral fluency, if you have a model response, if you have directions, but also reading fluency. And um, that close reading builds fluency, but it builds in their engagement. And I want to urge those of you, say from grade 3 on up, you can also take a section. You've read this section of a text about the effect of plastic on the environment, on animals, on our waterways, on our forests. And you've read this a couple times with them. Now you're dividing it up and giving partner A and B each an assigned section. Let them select words and let them read to their partner, because they shouldn't just be reading without the other person having a job, whether in a group or um, with a partner. I want to quickly show a clip of me doing this with a 5th grade class. Thumbs up to show me you're ready. Ready? All right, here we go. Starting from the top. Look around. Do you see a glowing screen? It's likely. Smartphones are everywhere. So are televisions, video game, tablets, and computers. Screens connect us to people. They entertain us. They also help us learn new information. Screens make our lives easier and more fun. That was beautiful reading. Let's pick up the pace a little bit, the speed a little bit, and I plan to leave out 3 different words. One toward the beginning, one toward the middle, and the end. All right, fluent readers, help me out here. Look around. Do you see a glowing screen? It's likely smartphones are. So colleagues, you can see they are 100% with me. And you want to, sometimes when I've got younger readers or I've got students who are early in their English language reading or a more difficult passage, I'll take a section and read it 3 times, leaving out different words. I included a number of resources to help you with this. One on page 29 really goes through these various reading techniques for multiple reads to build fluency before you're really digging in with comprehension tasks. And I also included a page on emergent readers with young readers or students new to learning English, how to do that echo reading routine. And this is one I like teaching parents, the tracked reading and echo reading, as well as any classroom aids. But for those of you in grade 3 on up that are starting to get more extended text in language arts, science, reading math problems, really stepping out how to do that teacher-led and partner-led closed routine. I'll finish by saying we need to build reading fluency across the school day, not just with reading selections, with our discussion questions, with our prompts and writing prompts, with writing exemplars. And I included a resource really talking about all these different ways to build fluency. You want to do many things to support literacy development on your campus, then really get all your colleagues using these practices. At the end of my slides, I included a recap of what the steps were in preparing students for an interaction and for facilitating whole class discussion. I also, from HMH, you're going to get an article I've written, a couple articles that really focus on setting up productive interactions with academic English learners, as well as building fluency. And anything you find in the resources from me, you are more than welcome to use with peers to share. Just if you use any handouts, just to at least keep the source on for the provenance. This has been a lot of information in a short amount of time, but I hope I've added some tools to your instructional toolkit and that you'll think a little more carefully before you set up your next interactions and build fluency.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kinsella, for such an informative and engaging presentation. We now have time for questions from our audience. So we can make sure we don't lose track of those in the chat. We do ask you please submit those through the Q&A box instead of the chat. So I will now go to the chat, Dr. Kinsella, and read some of the questions we've received. And thank you all again for such fantastic engagement. Here's a good question that we have received here. What might scaffolding look like for students at the earliest levels of proficiency?
Absolutely. At early levels of proficiency, scaffolding for interaction, for classroom interaction, really needs to involve a lot of use of sentence starters, sentence frames, model responses that they can see in my work with primary grades and upper elementary when students are relatively newly acquiring English or newcomers in middle and high school. We really need to do more showing, not just saying. We can't rely just on verbal modeling. We need to show it to them. You saw how I used a precise word bank. A lot of Blues for You show them model responses. Don't constrain them with that. But we really need to look through our lessons and think, where do I want to clock in more miles on the tongue? Where do I really want to get everyone talking? Letting them brainstorm, translanguaging if, they wish, letting them brainstorm, letting them review, but then looking through my week and my unit and thinking, where do I want to elevate? How can I support? And with our youngest scholars, I'm seeing they are readily responding to use of spoken frames, response frames, writing frames, precise word banks, model responses, but letting students who are attentive use your idea if they need to, if that's appropriate.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Kinsella. Here's a question that builds on something that you had just mentioned. What is your opinion on the use of translanguaging as a strategy?
I am a real passionate advocate of translanguaging, particularly when students are brainstorming ideas, when they're reviewing content, when they're reviewing something that we learned. And I'm not adverse to them, if we have a classroom context where everyone speaks the same home language and filling that in. But particularly when they're at early levels of expression. But we need to have some times during the lesson when we're really trying to work on their English accuracy, their spoken and written English accuracy. So the translanguaging, I really appreciate particularly more in the brainstorming and idea generation level, or if they're trying to explain something to their peers. But then having some precise times throughout a unit of study when accuracy in English is the goal.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Dr. Kinsella. Shifting gears slightly, someone asked a question specific to how can we effectively support multilingual learners who are hesitant to participate in class discussions due to limited language confidence without making them feel as though they're put on the spot? Do you have any strategies or guidance for encouraging participation for those that may be hesitant to do so?
Absolutely. Actually, everything I focused upon in this webinar, my career, my real career focus early was really on English learners in the US school system, and I've worked extensively abroad as well, that were less confident and less successful language learners, that were tentative. And looking at practices I learned in my teacher preparedness just were backfiring, that were not enough for them. That we know the greatest factor to influence motivation in learning is not the topic. It is the student's perception that they can be successful. And so if you want, you're more reserved and tentative and underconfident. And I'm the mother of a dually designated English learner. We adopted our son, who's now 21, at 3.5 from Guatemala with profound developmental delays. And when they saw our family portfolio, what I did, what my spouse does, that our daughter was in a kindergarten dual language class program in Spanish and in English, um, that that they thought this is a family, given Dr. Kinsella's expertise, that'll get this child speaking because he was selective mute. And with a very hesitant, with a capital H, contributor, the kinds of things, having our students, having a response scaffold for them, giving them a nice partner, letting them brainstorm first, letting them at times collaborate on a response with a partner, um, using response frames, starters, giving a precise word bank and saying, these are words you might use. Uh, but you don't have to, but these are ones you might use, modeling responses and saying, you may use one of my responses if you wish. Doing those kinds of things that increase the odds. Also, I tell them that I won't call on them spontaneously, randomly. And I talk to them and say, often I may ask you to go first for me, or I may ask you to volunteer at the end. But tell them you're going to call on them. And that will already diminish. I plan on calling you second, so be ready, and they do.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Kinsella.
You're welcome.
Here's a question that has come up through the Q&A box a couple of times, relevant to strategies to encourage speaking within content area classes. So if they're in a math class, if they're in their social studies class, what strategies might we use within content area classes that are maybe not specific to an English language development class?
Right, very much so. So a lot of my career work is really supporting the dedicated English language development context, where they have an hour where it's really focusing on advancing their English language proficiency, but supporting integrated English language development across the school day. And how we're treating vocabulary with integrity, how we're addressing text with integrity. And math, science, social studies require a lot of academic interaction. And we need to look at the lesson questions. We need to look at the lesson tasks and determine where can we support students linguistically. And a month ago, I did a big institute with a colleague and friend of mine for all high school educators for 2 days, working specifically with English learners in their classrooms with high concentrations, and another for elementary educators. And we were focusing. Next week, I'll be at Fordham University in New York City doing one on addressing vocabulary in content area instruction. But we need to be teaching things, but we need to be supporting their interaction. So the same use of response frames, same use of precise word banks, teaching them the language for interaction with those. How do you compare? How do you contribute? How to show that you're attentively listening, and teaching our vocabulary, but also getting them to practice using it with support. All of these are ways to support content area instruction.
Fantastic. Thank you, Dr. Kinsella. A question here relevant to those that may be new to the teaching, to teaching multilingual learners. Do you have any suggestions for new teachers who may be new to working with multilingual learners?
Well, I have a few. One, take advantage of all professional learning opportunities you can, like this. Another is to really befriend some people that are more experienced, but that are also successful. Because often experience doesn't necessarily mean you were effective. But to befriend some people that are more experienced. I read widely, but selectively when it comes to instruction of English learners. One resource I publish a lot because I like the integrity of their publication is called Language Magazine. And the article that Courtney will be sending you, the articles are from Language Magazine. It's an inexpensive publication for the international market, focusing on world language as well as English language instruction, and they have very high quality articles. But taking advantage of any professional learning opportunities you can, whether it's through TESOL, whether it's through publishers like HMH, and being focused on what you want to learn.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Dr. Kinsella. Here's a great question that's come up, specific to strategies for those advanced learners. The question here is specific to finding ways to challenge advanced readers and allowing them to model reading for others to see. But are there other strategies for them to feel like they're part of the class, but they're also not being left behind, given that they may be more advanced in their learning?
Yes, absolutely. When I work with a mixed ability class, I, you know, when I really have developed relationships and understandings of students' proficiency, I enlist students that are stronger readers to really help me with reading aloud to the class. Well, like I will always do the first read, but then maybe I've asked Vera and I've asked Leo, that you're going to read these parts, that they look over their section, they have the words they're going to leave out. When we're having discussion around the text understandings, talking to them, like I'm going to, some of the questions that are a little bit easier, I'm going to be, really having students interact with their partner, contribute, but I'm going to be relying on you for some slightly more sophisticated, responses and really talking to them and giving them roles to help me. But not just having them read aloud with no other mission than just saying, I've asked Leo to read aloud to the class. That Leo's got to be reading like I am, and using the same practices. Those are some ways that I've definitely enlisted them and talked to them too, because my experience is some of the most effective readers with the most complex understandings are not necessarily the professional participants. They're more reserved. And our daughter was adopted from Vietnam and just really highly gifted. We just nurtured her, but she speaks many languages and a really voracious reader and was reading at age 4. So just calling on a precocious student to read aloud to the class isn't really the best thing to do, but to really talk to students like that, give them key roles to help you out. But to also talk to them and say, I'm going to reserve some more complex questions for you, and I'll really be greatly appreciative if you can respond.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Kinsella. We are just about at time here, so that's all the time we will have for questions today. Thank you for everyone who contributed. We do hope you found today's session insightful, practical, and energizing as you continue your very important work with multilingual learners. A very special thank you to Dr. Kinsella for sharing her expertise, research, and decades of classroom experience with us today. Her commitment to advancing equity and excellence for English learners is truly inspiring, and her ability to translate that commitment into actionable, shareable strategies is what truly does make her a teacher's teacher. As a reminder, today's session was recorded, and all who attended this event live will receive a certificate of attendance along with a link to the recording within 1 week. Dr. Kinsella's slides and additional multilingual learner support resources will also be shared via email at that time. If you're viewing this session via the YouTube live stream, please refer to the instructions in the description below to request a certificate of attendance. Thank you again for being a part of today's conversation and for everything you do to support and empower multilingual learners in your classrooms and learning communities. We do look forward to seeing you at future sessions. Have a wonderful day.